Hello, hello, Theo. We are live, and I'm very happy to have you as part of our Christmas campaign. And a better late than later, or than never, especially. Uh, well, I'm very happy to have you. Let me just introduce you with a couple of words, and then I will give you the stage to share all of the interesting things you have prepared. So, Theo Smith. Theo Smith is an amazing person, in my opinion, leading neurodiversity advocate, author of the award winning book Neurodiversity at Work, Drive Innovation, Performance, and Productivity with a Neurodiverse Workforce. It sounds very um, uh, very interesting to me, but you will elaborate on that, on the book, and share more about it. And Theo is a podcast host of Neurodiversity, eliminating uh, Kryptonite and enabling superheroes. And Kryptonite, that was the Superman's thing, right? The thing that really makes him weak, and he cannot use his superpower. So welcome, Theo, and the stage is yours to share anything you want.
Amazing. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here. And yes, kryptonite, that's exactly right. It's the thing that stops Superman being able to do anything. He is completely disabled by kryptonite. And that's really important when we talk about the topic of neurodiversity today. So, you've already mentioned the things that I do. I write quite a bit about the subject. I've written a book, a podcast, but I also write a lot of content on LinkedIn and across other social media channels. I have a YouTube channel and I create quite a lot of content because I'm passionate about this subject and I want to share it with the world. So, what I'm focusing on is removing the barriers to over 1 billion neurodiverse talent. And you may think, whoa, 1 billion people. Well, we've just hit the 8 billion mark globally, people, right, on this planet. The reality is that those people who are neurodiverse account for around 15 to 20% of the population. It could be more. So it is by no means inconceivable that we consider over 1 billion people who are neurodiverse. And I'll come on to explain what that means in a second. But what I want to do is I want to empower innovation and transformation in business and the world through enabling these 1 billion people who may have faced barriers during their life and their careers. So what is neurodiversity? Right? So some of you may be thinking, but we don't know what you're talking about, Theo. What is neurodiversity? Well, neurodiversity is like biodiversity, right? So maybe you've got a good concept of what biodiversity is. We need variation in plants, in trees, in bees. We need bees. A world without bees is a world at risk. Bees are the great pollinators. 80 to 90% of pollination is done by bees. If we had no bees, it would cost farmers billions and billions of pounds or dollars or whatever currency you want to choose. It would cost billions to replace the job that bees do. What would we do? Would we have little bee bots we'd engineer that would go around and do the jobs that bees do? Why do we want to replace bees when they do such a great job and they do it naturally, right? They're a part of the ecosystem. So when we consider the importance of biodiversity, the variation and variety in plants and trees and bees, and how important that is, it is not so inconceivable to think how important it is for the natural variation of the human brain. So neurodiversity, in fact, is exactly that every single one of us has a unique brain. Like a thumbprint, not one of us has a brain that is the same as somebody else. Actually, it goes even further. We have billions of brain cells, billions. Imagine around the cognitive variation and variability that exists when every single one of us has billions of brain cells. If these thumbprints can't be the same, right, it doesn't look that complicated, then billions of brain cells is got to be complicated, right? So neurodiversity is the fact that every single one of us has different brains. And you might be thinking, well, okay, but what is the big interest in this subject? Well, not everybody has been marginalized or system impacted just because of the way that their brains work. What I mean by that is not everybody has faced a barrier to being able to do something or achieve something just because their brain works differently. And that is what we call the neurodiverse movement, or the neurodiversity movement, or neurodivergent, or neurominority. It's people who may be ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyslexic, dyscalculic, dyspraxic, on the autism spectrum, people whose brains perhaps see the world in a slightly different way, and because of that, they have been marginalized or system impacted. They face barriers. And what we want to do is we want to remove those barriers, because we're talking about incredibly, exceptionally gifted talent that are being missed or discounted just because they see the world in a different way. Their brains may work in a different way to a higher proportion of thinking types of society. And what we're talking about when we talk about neurominorities, like I said, I mentioned a few like ADHD and dyslexia, but also Down syndrome, epilepsy, chronic mental health illnesses such as bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, borderline personality disorder, and anxiety and depression can all have an impact on the way that the brain functions, the way that the brain sees the world. And we want to be able to support individuals. However, the way that these terms are presented are as disorders, something wrong with the brain. Whereas we want to reframe it, it's not something wrong with the brain, it's that the brain works differently. And therefore, we need to take a different approach to get the best out of it. And why do people care? Right? Why do people all of a sudden take an interest in the subject of neurodiversity? Well, we know because we can see the data. This is Google Trends. You can go on Google Trends now, type in Google Trends into Google, find it, type the search term neurodiversity, and you can see in the last 4 to 5 years, poof, more people are typing in what is neurodiversity, neurodiversity definition, neurodiversity movement. Neurodiversity meaning people want to know, what is it? But why have people taken such an interest in a term that is 30 years old? The term was coined by Judy Singer and Harvey Bloom. And it was to challenge the status quo, because people were being left out of the system. People weren't being supported, people on the autism spectrum. However, the topic, the subject, the term neurodiversity has evolved greatly. And one of the challenges that we've had is we've had global unrest, COVID being just one example, where maybe children didn't go to school, maybe parents were locked at home in their room, maybe they couldn't do the things that they could do before. Maybe it's not just COVID, maybe it's war, it's unrest, it's the world that we live in is changing. And adults have been looking in a mirror and thinking, why do I respond in the way that I respond? Why do I feel the way that I feel? Why have I got OCD? Why have I got obsessive compulsive disorder? And why do I notice it even more now I'm at home and I'm getting quite particular about the design of my office and where everything is? People are starting to look more into themselves, becoming more reflective of who they are, and maybe looking at their children and being reflective of their children. And they're starting to ask questions around their cognitive makeup, why their brain works in that way, why they respond in a particular way. And remember, parents, adults, they're CEOs, they're HR directors, They're pickers and packers and engineers and taxi drivers. Parents are powerful people who are asking the question, and they're going into organizations and they're challenging them to say, I don't want my child to be marginalized or system impacted, or I don't want my child to be locked out of the education system or the work environment just because they're autistic. What are you going to do about it to make sure that when my child gets to the workplace, you're going to let them in? And this topic is growing significantly right across Europe, US, South Africa, and it's spreading fast, the interest. So we can no longer ignore it. And you know you can't ignore the topic when the youth, the future leaders of tomorrow, start to take to TikTok to ask the same questions. TikTok has had 12 billion views of the hashtag ADHD. 12 billion views of the hashtag ADHD. That is lots of young people going to TikTok to see the experiences of others, look at it and go, that's like me. Hey, I do that. I mean, could I be ADHD? Could I be autistic? Could I be dyslexic? And what we now know is if you're ADHD, you're much more likely to also be on the autism spectrum or dyslexic or have dyspraxia or dyscalculia. And this is fascinating. And there's lots of young people looking at TikTok, seeing people like them, going to their mum and dad, hey, this is like me. And hey, dad, it's a bit like you. And this is why we're seeing a huge amount of interest in this topic, not just from young people, but from their parents, from adults as well, who are getting great insight into the way that their brain works. But one of the challenges that we have is only 4% of companies that say they value diversity consider disabilities, and even fewer include learning and thinking differences, neurodiversity, right? So this is a problem that we have at the moment, but this is changing rapidly. So organizations understanding that there's opportunities here, IBM, Microsoft, EY, some of the biggest tech companies, some of the biggest consultancies are now seeing it not just as a very important factor that they need to focus on because young people are coming through and they're interested in it, but actually there are benefits, huge benefits to having neurologically diverse teams because it accounts for 20% of the population. You cannot ignore that commercially. 2 in 10 people. So let's bring to life the experiences then of neurominorities. Let's start to see the power of the brain in a new light. When I first started to look at this topic 3, 4, 5 years ago, one of the big issues I had is I would search online, and you can still see this now because Google doesn't just forget. Some of the top searches, some of the top posts in searches are still from old thinking, old theories around this concept. Basically, it was a bit like this. I could see long lists of what was wrong with somebody who's autistic. I could see long lists of what was wrong with somebody who's ADHD. And these long lists were from psychologists, from doctors, from academics, lots of clever people, cleverer than me, qualifications coming out of their ears. Yet they got it wrong. And I tell you why they got it wrong, because they'd write these long lists of what was wrong with somebody, and they might put at the bottom, but they may make a good developer, or they might be an incredible mathematician. I'm never going to be a good developer, and I'm never going to be a mathematician. So where does that leave me? Am I just rubbish? Am I just that long list of somebody who's never going to work? Hello, I wrote an award-winning 120,000 word book. I never wrote an essay much, but I wrote a book. This is the reality, right? The world would have us believe that we are broken, that we need fixing, that because I'm dyslexic and ADHD and autistic, yes, I tick 3 boxes. Because of that, I'm broken and I need fixing. Well, I wanted to see it in a different light. If you go into a shop and say, hey, I want to buy that iPhone, and the salesperson says, you want to buy this iPhone? Yeah. Okay, let me tell you about this iPhone. Right? Whatever you do, do not drop this iPhone. It will break. Oh, Okay. I mean, drop it or break. End story. And by the way, if you use it for too long, it might get really hot and it might tell you, I'm getting too hot, put me down. Right, okay. And finally, it's only got a 12 megapixel camera. Right? Its competitors have got a 120 megapixel camera. Whoa. I ain't buying that phone. Like, you keep your phone. I'm going elsewhere. I'm buying a different phone. Like, you must love iPhone to want to go and buy that phone. However, what he should have said was, this is one of the most innovative pieces of technology on the marketplace. It's expensive. Don't drop it. Look after it. You wouldn't throw your expensive television on the floor. You wouldn't throw your laptop on the floor. Don't let this drop on the floor, right? Put it in a protective case. And by the way, it is super powerful, right? It has incredible technology going on within it, right? So powerful that you need to understand how to utilize it. You need to close down some of the apps. You need to reboot it every now and again. You need to update the technology. And by the way, sometimes you've got to put it down, plug it in, and let it rest. That's how powerful this bit of technology is. But to get the best out of it, you need to understand it. And finally, it's only got a 12 megapixel camera. But don't let that deceive you. It's not all about the megapixel. Take a picture with it. Compare it to the other camera phones with a 120 megapixel camera. I guarantee you, you will not be disappointed. Now, this is the problem in life, right? When we go forwards with all the things that's wrong with something, why would we buy it? Why would we hire someone? Why would we think somebody's got skills and abilities when we lead with all their challenges? And this is what we were doing. And we, as people who were on the spectrum, who are neurodiverse, were allowing it. We were almost saying, yeah, we are broken. Yeah, we do need fixing. Oh, poor me. Boom, let's stop that. No, we have incredible strengths. We just have to understand them, and then we have to promote them, and we have to be able to share them. And that's where we needed to move. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I started the podcast. And that's why I work really hard to change perceptions, to change the way that people see incredibly unique, neurologically diverse brains. And the problem is, this started in school. Right? Kids in school face trauma all the time. But if you're dyslexic and you go into school like me when I was young, a while ago, right? When I used to go in and they'd say, Theo, write your name on the board. So my name's Theo. I couldn't say my name properly. I used to say Theo. And everybody used to laugh at me because I said Theo and they could all say Theo. And it wasn't their name, it was my name. And because I couldn't say my name properly, Theo, I used to write it with an F, not a TH, Theo. So I had all these problems very early age where I couldn't say my name, I couldn't write my name, and I was mocked for it. And because I'm highly impulsive, I didn't just let that go. So it caused me all kinds of issues. And that was just the beginning. Now imagine every single day in school, having to write on the board, having to stand up and read out aloud. All the things that you may find difficult, you're having to do again and again and again. And the kids are mocking and laughing at you, and the teachers are shouting at you because you can't get it right. This trauma does not go away. So when I now stand in a meeting room with leaders of organizations or boards or senior management, and they ask me to write on a board, I still become a 6, 7, 8-year-old child. I go right back to that point. I sweat. I panic because I'm worried that these senior leaders sat with me are going to think I'm a joke. How are we bringing this guy in to talk about one of the leading concepts to transform our global organization, and he can't even spell? He can't even write. I can't hold a pen properly. One of the biggest adjustments in my life is the laptop. It's the computer, because I still can't write with a pen. I still can't write more than a couple of lines. If I have to take notes, which I actually can't do, I pretend to write. I'll get it as much as I can, but if I'm asked to read back what I've written, I can't read it. But I don't want everybody in the room to know I can't write the notes, so I just pretend to write the notes. And this is the problem. This trauma that happens to you in school, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't go away. It can manifest itself later in life if we don't deal with it, if we don't hit it head on, right? And this is why it's really important that we truly understand neurodiversity as a concept, the way our brain works, so we don't ignore it. Because our brain won't change, our brain won't, it will evolve and adapt and develop and strengthen, but we can't have a different brain. Our brain won't wake up one day and go, I'm not autistic or I'm not dyslexic. And this is why it's really important we get a better understanding of this concept to ensure that we support one another and we support ourselves. And companies are now at the top level starting to look at this and starting to consider it. ASML, one of the leading semiconductor businesses in the world, one of the fastest growing, largest tech companies in Europe, their CTO, their Chief Technology Officer, who is also their co-chairman, I only spoke at this company a few weeks ago to their global workforce. He said, I'm so dyslexic that I can't even write a sentence. Me too, Martin, me too. That's the reality. Now we're finding people at the top of organizations are willing to come out and go, me too. And that is powerful, because when we see representation, when we see that people can hit the top of organizations, the key roles, some of the most innovative organizations, and say, I can't write a sentence, yet I'm co-chairman and CTO of this organization, that means something. And that's the direction that we're now going in. And that's why we can't ignore it anymore. And what I'm actually talking about is spiky profiles, right? My co-author, Amanda Kirby, owns this technology. Incredible. And it can provide you with your spiky profiles. This is one element of my spiky profile. What you'll see is this is my memory, vision, auditory skills, and senses. You can see a high spike to creativity, right? A high spike to creativity. However, I only have one green strength. Most other people would have a few more strengths in this area. I have lots of red, which is many challenges, and I have quite a lot of yellow, which is some challenges, and only one of the blue, visual spatial. So my big challenge here is I have short-term memory, poor working memory. I can't remember more than 3 things. And I struggle to process information like listening. So you might think when I was younger that I had problems with hearing. I don't have problems with hearing. I have problems with processing information. And this is the balance between strength and challenges. Now, if you only looked at my challenges, you could think, why would we ever want to employ Theo? Why would we want Theo on our team? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I process more information than probably most of the people in the room. I'm seeing and hearing all these different things going on. I'm hearing that conversation over there. I'm seeing this bit of danger. This lorry comes towards us here. Everything. I'm taking on. That's a huge amount of information to process, right? That impacts my ability to take in other key bits of information. Like if you said, Theo, remember these 3 things. Really hard for me to do that because so much else is going on in my brain. But the benefit of that is that actually, because I'm processing so much information, I have so much more information to pull from. And because I'm often trying to get around doing things like spelling or writing, because I'm always thinking, oh, I can't write, so how can I convince them to let me do something else? That makes me really good at selling, at convincing people around concepts, because I'm so used to convincing people to come to my way of thinking, because I so struggle with certain areas of their systems and processes, right? So that spike, even though it's only one, it becomes very powerful. And that spike is like a mountain in comparison to other people's hills, right? So that becomes really powerful. But the problem is we still see people across many cognitive skills, and we assess them across many cognitive skills, and we expect people to be organized and to have good listening skills and, to be all these things, right? Especially with entry-level jobs. You need to be good at all these 6 things. Well, for somebody like me, I might be good at 1 or 2. I might knock them out of the park, but I need help with these. And if you don't listen and don't help me with these, you're never going to see these. And this is how we're trying to influence the world of work, to adapt their thinking around how they see talent. So here's some practical tools and tips to just better understand it, support fellow neurodiverse colleagues or friends or family members. And the first thing we need to think about is we need to think about respect for one another. You know, and we don't offer it enough. You know, avoiding banter in situations that shouldn't have it, right? Microaggressions, making sure everybody has a voice in the room. We may enjoy talking, we may enjoy communicating, but what about those people who struggle to get their voice out? How are we helping them get their voice out? How are we ensuring they've got a platform? And some people need time to process information. How are we inviting them back to the table once they've had a chance to process the information, so that they get to share their thoughts and ideas? Because otherwise we just get the same ideas and the same thoughts. And we need to widen participation within our communities, our groups, and our teams. And we need to seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's Covey, right? Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Haven't read it, go read it. But that's the one I love most. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Most of the time, we're just thinking, when is that person going to shut up so I can tell them what I think? Because what I think is so important, and I know it's the best. And, you know, no. If we truly understand what that person is trying to communicate with us, truly understand, really get underneath the skin of it, right? Then we are much better able to solve the problem, answer the question, or challenge them on what they're trying to say, but positively. Don't assume somebody is autistic or dyslexic. We need to work on tangible ways to help them or to help ourselves. And don't ask yourself why someone wants to communicate or engage in a different way. Instead, let's just try and work hard to facilitate it, right? To help them. Because one of the big problems, coming back to the beginning, is we put kryptonite in front of people. And that kryptonite, as we mentioned, is that thing that takes away power. Now, think about this. You may be in a room and the lights may be very bright and they may be flickering. It may be annoying, okay? These lights are annoying me. They're flickering and they're bright and whew. Or it may not bother you at all. Maybe you don't even notice the flickering bright lights. However, you may get migraines from bright lights, especially flickering lights or intense sunshine, for example, coming through the window with an inability to put blinds down, right? Now, if you are somebody who gets migraines, you might even get visual aura, right? So you might even almost have your image distorted, your ability to see distorted by visual aura, and then these migraines. That is ultimately having kryptonite in your life, because you've come into an environment and nothing to do with what you've done, but to do with the environment, to do with the bright lights or the noise or the chaos, is triggering something which stops you being able to perform. It takes away your strength, your power. Kryptonite. We have an ability to remove the kryptonite. We can change the lights. We can change the light bulbs. We can adapt the environment. We can offer spaces that are quieter. We can offer pods, right? There are many things in our environments that have an impact, like asking me to write with a pen instead of allowing me to type, right? That's kryptonite for me. I really struggle. It has an impact on me, stops me being able to perform. Imagine how many times we have kryptonite all through our days. And it's not just about our work. Sometimes it's at home. We have things we struggle with, or with relationships and partnerships that ultimately break down because we don't understand each other's kryptonite well enough, right? The thing that takes power away from us. And it can be completely disabling, completely. And if you have too much kryptonite in your life, in your day, you can have a complete collapse, a psychological, physiological collapse, either at the end of the day or at the end of the week or at the end of the month. It can stop you in your tracks. Well, guess what? We can remove some of the kryptonite, but sometimes we are the worst enemies because we don't understand our kryptonite. We put it in front of us. We choose to include it in our daily lives and activities rather than recognizing that this is the thing that is stopping us from being and incredible selves. And we think about it in maybe the way that athletes, nutrition and exercise, the thing that make them stronger, make them quicker, make them better. Why do we not consider it in terms of our neurological makeup? And that if you slightly change something within what you eat, it can impact on your ability to perform. The brain is no different. And the reality is one of the biggest challenges that we have when we consider neurodiversity is communication, the way that we talk and engage with each other, the things that we say, the things that we don't say, how clear and concise we are to communicate, or the assumptions that we make, right? Just because somebody doesn't look us in the eye doesn't mean we shouldn't trust them. Just because somebody won't shake our hand with a good grip doesn't mean they don't have strength of character or of will or ability to knock stuff out of the park, right? Some people don't like touch of another human being they don't know. Some people don't want to embrace with someone they don't know. Some people need clarity in terms of what's being asked of them. And especially then if we add the nuances of different cultures and languages, and whether or not we're speaking to somebody in English and that may not be their first language. So there are many good reasons on why we should think about every single letter of every single word that we use and how we use it to engage and connect with people. Think of it like algorithms, right? The words we use, the letters we use, the algorithms we build, the numbers we use, right? If you build a recipe and you get one of the ingredients wrong, you can't be surprised if the thing that you bake doesn't taste nice, if it tastes odd, if it doesn't rise. You may just miss one ingredient. Communication is no different. And when we think about people who are neurodiverse, whose brains think in often not typical ways that we would expect, it is really important that we're ensuring we communicate and engage with them in a way that they can connect and understand. And it is not that complicated. Sometimes it may be in an email. Rather than writing lots of information, we put at the top of the email, this email requires action in the subject line. And then at the top of the email, you put 2 bullet points explaining the 2 key things that have to come out of that email. Then you can put lots of content, right? For somebody like me who's dyslexic and ADHD, that is powerful because it takes me so long to read it. I keep getting distracted. I've read it 3 times and I still don't know, am I supposed to do something with that email or not? Like the detail can be there, but ultimately the action should be front and center at the top. Now imagine that in everything that we do, all communications that we make. That is fundamentally how important this is. Whether it's part of communication strategy, social media engagement, talking to somebody in the street, we should always be considering this. And it's not that I want one type of way of reading or learning, or, I just want to watch video. Rubbish. We need variety, and that's really important, so that we're triggering different parts of the brain, engaging in different parts of the brain to keep the brain active and interested in what it is we're trying to tell them. And here's a brilliant example. I am dyslexic. It takes me about 4 times as long to read than someone else. Maybe even longer if I'm distracted enough, right? Now, you could think, well, Theo's never going to be able to read very fast. His brain is broken in that sense, and he will always get lost when he's reading, and things will always look like they're jumbled. Well, no, something very simple. Highlight the first couple of letters of each word, and all of a sudden, I can read twice as fast, and I don't get lost as often because I have a better anchor. My brain understands bionic reading, which is an organization, a tech company it's set up, much better than traditional reading. We've been reading text like this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't change it. We shouldn't adapt it. All of a sudden, it's not my brain that's broken. It's the way that we provide information, content, text. We change that, and all of a sudden my brain can engage in it. This is what we talk about when we talk about the barriers that exist to brains, human brains that we have put in the place, and we expect all brains to be able to access information in the same way. It's not the case. And one of the things we need to consider when we work with teams in future, do we ask everybody joining that team how they would like to work, their preferences? Often we just throw people into a team and off we go. And the reality is we may ask everybody to do a task, cut a straight line in a piece of paper. And you think everybody can do that. Cut a straight line in a piece of paper. We're going to give you 1 minute to do it. You're all in a room, go. However, we've put the bowl of scissors front of the room. Everybody has to go up and get the scissors first, quickly. Bit of a rush. Well, one person's in a wheelchair and they struggle to get to the scissors and get back quick enough. They miss their minute. They can't do it. Another person is left-handed. Oh, we only provided right-handed scissors. Somebody else has arthritis, right? They can't hold the scissors we provided. They're too small. They could cut a straight line on a piece of paper, but just not with these scissors. They need a different tool. And someone else is ADHD and autistic. And we've got a room that has windows down either side. And there's a busy call center office with a lot of noise and hustle and bustle. They're so distracted that before they know it, their minutes past, they've not even got up to get the scissors. Boom. Well, that's not very inclusive. So what we thought was a very inclusive project that everybody could get involved in and everybody could do. All of a sudden, we've made 30-40% of the room not feel included, potentially. Now that we need to rethink that. Every time somebody joins a project that we're working in, or every time somebody's in a team or a class or whatever it may be, are we asking those people, are we saying to them, hey, this is how this team's going to work. This is how we're going to structure it. Here's the times, the days we're going to meet. Here's the tools we're going to use. What do people think before we get started? What do you think? Do you have any challenges around the way that we've structured this? Can we provide any adaptations? When we start to present it in that way, we're not saying anybody autistic, anybody in a wheelchair. We're saying we want to make this project, this team, this piece of work as inclusive as possible. Here's how we're going to make it happen. Right. What do we need to adapt to ensure that everybody can give their input and show their best selves? And one interesting thing that happened to me a few years ago is a head of recruitment for a leading tech company said, I've got a candidate coming for a telephone interview and they've asked if they can bring their mum on the call. And I'm like, what? They've asked if they can bring their mum on the call. I'm like, okay, what's the problem? I don't know whether I should let them bring their mum on the call. I'm like, well, why? Well, they can't bring their mum to work, right? And I'm like, well, no, but they're not asking that. They're asking if their mum can join the telephone interview. So I said, don't think about the next step. Of course, you don't want their mum coming to work. Fine, this job's for one person, right? I'm sure they understand that. So can their mum come to the call? I mean, is there a barrier to their mum coming on the call? And he went, well, no, but she can't answer the questions. I'm like, well, again, put some parameters around it. She's not asking to answer the questions. She's saying, could she come on the call? What else can you tell me about the individual? Well, he's early in his career. He's a developer and he's told me he's autistic. He's on the autism spectrum. So his mum is providing a coaching role. His mum wants to come on the call because she wants to be able to support the son to make sure that the son understands the questions that are being asked of him, because she will know that in past interviews he would have misunderstood sometimes what's being asked, because some people on the autism spectrum need very clear, specific examples of what it is you need from them. And if you're not very specific, they may miss the nuance of the question. And I can tell you from experience, managers often go on tangents. Managers are often not very good at asking clear and direct questions. And managers often think they're cleverer than they are. And therefore, what they do is they ask a big, long, clever question, or they think it's clever. And the candidate really can't understand the question in the concept of what they do. Doesn't mean they can't do it. They just can't understand the question because it's too convoluted. It's too complicated, right? When really it could be asked much simpler. And the mum is able to see the response of the son and say, can you rephrase that question? Because I don't think my son, it looks like he understands specifically what's being asked. Or, son, give the example of that time when you did X. And therefore, the son is able to give the answer. In that instance, the manager who asked me, the head of recruitment, said that interview went really well. We were able to get exactly what we needed from that candidate, and we were able to understand exactly what they could do, which is the whole point of an interview. He said that probably wouldn't have happened had we not accepted that adjustment for the mum to come on the call. And the mum was providing the role of a coach. This is really important because often for those individuals, again, it's the recruitment processes that are broken. It's the way the HR teams and recruitment teams and managers are constructing their recruitment processes that are broken, not the individual. But what it does mean is that incredible individuals are missing out on opportunities. And let me tell you this, some of the most incredible people on our planet, some people who've designed some of the most incredible pieces of technology, like I mentioned, like ASML, for example, or some people who create the most incredible code or solve some of the most challenging problems in science and mathematics, or the most incredible artists of being neurodiverse and neurodivergent, right? So we need these different types of minds, of thinking types in our organizations, but we started to cut them out. We started to segregate them, and we are at risk. We have a problem. So I'm going to bring this to a close now. And the challenge that we have is, at the beginning, I said neurodiversity was like biodiversity, right? They were quite similar. I'm going to go one step further. Neurodiversity and biodiversity are fundamentally hand in glove. They are the future of the planet, the future of business, the future of politics, the future of education, right? If we think about neurodiversity and we think about those people who challenge the status quo, those people who won't take no for an answer, those people who won't let governments derail their thinking just because they say it's okay, don't look up now, the planet is fine, right? Often those people, they are neurodivergent. Their brains work differently. They see the world differently, and therefore they are challenging the status quo, right? If we have a lack of neurodiversity, if we segregate certain minds out of society, we don't just put the future of business and politics and education at risk, we put the future of the planet at risk, because we will miss out on the creativity, the innovation, the transformation that we require to ensure that this planet continues to spin and we are able to continue to live on it. And that is how important neurodiversity is to the future of work and to the future of the world. Thank you for sticking with me. And I'm just going to go and do the annoying thing of trying to stop sharing. Right. Have you been able to do that for me? Stop there.
Yes, yes. Theo, thank you so much. It was very interesting for me listening to you and thinking about the necessary inclusion of people with ADHD. And I'm thinking, what are the common signs and, let's say, symptoms of people that have ADHD?
It's complex, as is the human brain, but this is why people have taken to TikTok, because people are sharing very little things like forgetting names, for example. So I shared a post about forgetting names. I struggle with name and face blindness, although I scored 100% on a super recognizer test, which means if you give me an image, I can look at that image, say of you, and I could look at 100 other images, and I could find other images of you, even though we're like 20 years old. So I'm really good at recognizing patterns in images. But if I met somebody and they gave me their name, even if they gave it to me 3 times and I met them a week later, there's no way I'd remember their name. There's no way, it's impossible. So a lot of people who are sometimes dyslexic or ADHD, may struggle with poor working memory. Not everyone, but some, which means poor working memory being like if you're asked to remember little bits and pieces, you'll really struggle with it. You might struggle with dates like birthdays. I keep forgetting the birthdays of my kids and my wife. You might struggle with any other dates. I still struggle with stuff like June and July because they sound similar. So up until I was a bit older, I always used to get months of the year mixed up. I get letters mixed up. I forget when there's two letters or one letter. So where words might have like a letter twice, like FF. Like I think, does it have two Fs or does it not have two Fs? And I second guess myself. So there's a lot of challenges, and some of them are connected. So some of them are because of the dyslexia, some of them are the ADHD, but then you put them together and it's like, so they're just some of the challenges. But you may have social anxiety, and women tend to show different to men. Not always. I am very much like my daughter, but the reason why women often don't get diagnosed or get missed is because men, when they're ADHD, tend to be more. There's more men who tend to be a bit more hyperactive in terms of their energy. Therefore, it's easier to see and to assess. And they may be good at sports, but they may be high energy. And therefore, in the classroom, they may be more likely to, cause disruption. Therefore, they're more likely to get a diagnosis because the teacher will be like, we've got a problem. This child is disruptive. How do we solve this problem? Let's go through diagnosis to see what's wrong with them. We go back to what's wrong rather than the ability. And with girls, they tend to sit quietly. They mask much more, and they're hyperactive in the brain, but not necessarily always physically hyperactive. And therefore, there's a lot going on in the brain, but they're not showing it in the same way that a boy might show it. So it's like there's loads of very small nuanced things that most people will go, oh, yes, I'm a bit forgetful sometimes. No, this is a common theme and thread that is throughout everything. You might have taken longer as a child to be able to do your shoelaces. You might have coordination skills. That might be dyspraxia. So you might be quite clumsy, deemed as clumsy, might bang into things, might break lots of your bones. You might, and often we find that there's links to dyspraxia, which is coordination skills. So some people with ADHD are fantastic at sports, but then you add dyspraxia and they might not be so good at sports because they might be bad at coordination. So never know where the tennis ball is. Whereas you might have high energy levels, but you can't balance the tennis ball. So you struggle with the sports, the coordination. So you see how it's not just, we can't segment the brain. So we can't say, oh, this is the dyslexic part of the brain. This is the ADHD part of the brain. This is the autistic part of the brain. No, I have one brain, and my brain happens to be dyslexic, autistic, and ADHD, and it's complex. So this is the nuances around it, that it's not as simple to, you can't just go answer these 5 questions. We can tell you if you're dyslexic or autistic. You have to go through a process with a psychologist who assesses you on a number of different core areas. But you can go and research this, educate yourself, and decide, do I associate with some of these things? And therefore, there's a higher likely chance I may be one of or more of these.
Great. Well, how about being in the parents' shoes? We have a question about it. Let me just display it. If you're a parent of a kid with ADHD, what is the piece of advice for them so they don't feel alone?
Wow, the parent is a really interesting thing. So what we've had in the last few years is global unrest. So what we've had is a lot of parents feeling alone and feeling sometimes less than, not good about themselves, feeling that they're not a good parent. Because my daughter is ADHD and autistic and dyslexic, like me. Oh, apple doesn't fall very far from the tree in that instance. But I'll be honest with you, it is hard. So every night, she is 9, every night since she's born, I spend 1.5 to 2 hours a night just to help manage her, calm her brain down to get her to sleep. And that is a process. She won't have anyone else do it. I have to do it. And I've done it for 9 years now. And every single night, I lose 1.5 to 2 hours a night doing this process. Now, the upshot is I love my daughter. She's incredible. She's amazing. But I lose 2 hours that other people don't lose. Other parents are telling their 9-year-old to go to bed. They go up to bed and they go to sleep. I have 2 hours of, so like that is just one thing. And so for parents with children with ADHD or autistic, often you face much greater level of challenges that are not recognized by others. And sometimes even worse, other people will deem you a bad parent. Can't you get your child to sleep? Can't you get your child to do their homework? Why can't you get your child to tie their shoelaces or to spell? Why is your child always running wild?
Yeah, the stigma part.
Yeah, the stigma part, right? Now, as an adult, I'm able to deal with this a bit better because I now know myself so well and I know my strengths so well, and I'm doing okay, right? I'm doing okay. I'm not done too bad. So I can look at my daughter and think, right, I need to protect my daughter to ensure that she can find her strengths as quickly as possible, because every single day people will tell her what her challenges are. And by the way, that will impact the parent. Because if people every single day are telling your child that they're not good enough, and their child is coming home crying, telling you they're not good enough, that has an impact on you as a parent. So you need to know you're not alone. There's loads of groups out there on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and where other people are sharing their stories, especially on things like Facebook, like community type groups, global ones that you can join. So you need to understand that not to measure yourself against other people. It's impossible. It is absolutely impossible. And that what you're doing is incredible for that child, because part of what the child is struggling with is not that the child has issues or problems. It's that the child is fighting every day against rapids, water coming the opposite direction, and they're swimming against it hard every day. Because the way that they teach in schools, the way that people talk to them, the way that people engage with them is hard work. It's like trying to speak to somebody. It's like trying to listen to somebody speak in a language that is not your first language every day, which some people will resonate, right? But imagine that it is in your first language, but that is the level of extra attention you're having to give. And the parent is exactly the same as well. So the parent's having to do that with a child, but if the parent is also ADHD, they're having to do it themselves. So it's double the amount of effort. So you have to be mindful and care for your own health and well-being, because that's what I worry about parents, is they put too much pressure on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Look after the mental health and well-being of your child. Make sure they have a loving environment. Let them know how incredible they are, because they are. As soon as they get out of that education system and get into the right type of environment, if they've been told of their strengths for a long, long time, rather than their challenges at home, they will fly. They will fly. Unfortunately, not every child has that support. And therefore, that's why we have a disproportionate amount of people in prison who are neurodiverse. About 50% of prisoners in the UK and the US and in other
50%.
50% are dyslexic. 1 in 3 prisoners are ADHD, because they're highly impulsive. So what happens is they make quick decisions, which is brilliant in business, brilliant for CEOs, but not very bad if you grew up in a tough environment where some of those quick decisions may be around making very, very bad choices.
Okay.
And you make quick bad choices, which ultimately end you up in a negative space. So, it's really important. Or you could be a parent that may quickly start to make bad choices that could make you end up in a bad place. So that's why mental health and well-being, top of the tree for me.
Okay, well, thank you so much. raising the awareness in general, because I believe that that many people are not aware really of that that there is such a thing as neurodiversity, and that people are different, and with all of those comparisons, it is just hard for every individual actually, if I have to be honest. Okay, another question. Hmm, can you tell us more about your book?
Of course I can. That's it. My award-winning book. Well, listen, here's a secret for you. Okay. My book you can buy anywhere. I think Amazon and bookshops all over the world. Depending on which country you're in, it may be a bit more tricky. But we used a global publishing house, Kogan Page, who are leaders in this space, business books. So you can go and buy it. However, if that's a barrier to you because of cost, or you don't like reading, I have a YouTube page, Neurodiversity at Work, or Neurodiversity with Theo Smith. I can share links and afterwards and
Please.
a YouTube page. You can go to my LinkedIn page and find links to this as well. Theo Smith UK, Neurodiversity. But also my podcast on any good podcasting host, Neurodiversity, Eliminating Kryptonite, Enabling Superheroes, right? A lot of the content in that, the interviews I had with people, I extracted those conversations and put them in the book. I mean, the book isn't just that, but that would give you a lot of insight from very interesting, fascinating people around the topic that you could learn from there. But my YouTube page has lots of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-minute videos on like helpful hints, tips, and what you can do here and there. So there's some extra options for you. But yeah, my book I wrote because I couldn't find a book that talked about it in a business context from
Yes.
a positive mindset. So I wrote it. I was like, I can't find the book, therefore I'm going to write the book, even though actually one of the biggest challenging things I've ever done, because I'm dyslexic. I still can't spell. I can't construct sentences properly. But, there's technology, there's help. I brought 30 other people, leading influencers in the space, to come in and give their story, their view, their perception. So this book, many hands make light work, right? We brought people together to truly bring out the positive themes around neurodiversity.
Nice. And and I have one more question. It's about again what are the I'm thinking about the conventional educational system, and as you mentioned, it's not the best in terms of just giving the right environment for people with ADHD to flourish. So my question is, for the people that are, I don't know, diagnosed, is that the word, with the ADHD? What are the ways to in a certain way cope with the educational environment, or with the world that is not ready for them? I don't want to use the word treatment, because this is not what I refer to, but mostly a coping mechanism. What would you, probably this is for the parents as well, I don't know, what is your point of view?
So it's dependent on the child, but imagine, let's give this example. A boy in a classroom that has high energy levels, right, and needs to keep moving, needs to keep doing stuff, right? You make them sit on a chair all day long, right? That is the opposite of what they need. So the most basic thing you're doing is you're making somebody who doesn't want to sit on a chair all day, physiologically and neurologically, they don't want to do it. And that's what you're making them do. It's like locking somebody in a cell in a darkened room. It like eventually it has an impact on them. And therefore, you've got to find ways outside of that environment, because we may not be able to change the school, right? You live in an area, that's the school. So you've got to find ways then to support that individual to get the best out of them outside of that environment. So it might be lots of clubs, lots of sport clubs or activities, or keep them busy. So, keep their mind busy. Or the other option, or together, ideally, is to influence the school, to get really close and involved with the school, to try and get them to make adaptations within the environment. But let me tell you, I've done that with my daughter. I've got legal behind me because I put it through the legal route. So I've got documentation, I've got extra support, but it's still a pill every single day for her. Even though I've got everything in place, it took us 4 years of fighting to get the help and support and the recognition, but she's still in that environment. She's still, you can't, it's like somebody who can't swim, you're still throwing them into the sea every day. Right? So even if you're giving them buoyancy aids and everything else, they can't swim. And that is fundamentally the biggest challenge they've got. So then once they come out, how are you looking after them? How are you getting the best out of them? How are you ensuring that they're able to see good in themselves, right? And for me, it was drama, it was acting. My mum got me involved in community theatre at a young age. And even though at school I was failing and I stopped turning up and I was getting all kinds of trouble, acting, I was able to express myself. I was getting respected and revered for the work that I did. I was getting people to tell me that I'm good, that I had some value, some sense of worth. That was powerful. And I now know that even though I stopped going to school, I stopped turning up, I didn't take exams, I bombed out, what I had was a sense of worth. Because I had a good family who loved me, but they got me involved in these other things that I was good at and where I had this sense of value and worth outside of the school system. And I think that's what we need to do for our children, is if we think that they're not getting what they need over here, what can we do over here to support? Love, a lot of it is around love, right? Just love and consideration and acceptance. The worst thing we can do is pretend like it's not happening. Tell a child they're not dyslexic, right? Tell a child, like so many parents were like, no, we don't want the label. I don't want my child to have a disability, or I don't want my child. Right, at the end of the day, the child's brain works in the way that it works. Call it what you want. Call it what you want. But the child's brain, it is happening, right? We ignore it. Then what happens is the child ends up thinking they are going insane. They think they're going crazy because everybody else is fine and they're not. And this is, we get a misdiagnosis, especially young girls getting diagnosed with eating disorders, depression, all these different things because of undiagnosed ADHD, autism, or whatever it may be, because they're being told nothing's going on when they know it's not right. They think they're going crazy. And then when they go to the doctors say, yeah, they are going a bit crazy. I'll give them this pill. Depression, and they start, self-harming or not eating, and because this is how they're trying to cope with the fact they can't understand what's going on in their brain. And they think it's not normal. It is absolutely normal. But it's because we are dismissing it and not accepting it that becomes the problem. So acceptance is key.
Yes, I really like it. Well, that's if they don't accept it sooner or later, they need to accept it, right? Theo, thanks so much for taking the time and for being part of our zero waste campaign, Christmas gift.
Love it.
So I believe you gave the biggest Christmas gift in terms of raising the awareness about the neurodiversity in general. Thank you so much. We will share the live to anyone that is interested in and that wants to keep in touch. And one more thing, let me share your podcast. It was eliminating Kryptonite and enabling superheroes, right?
Yes.
So I guess anyone could tune in and understand more about this golden mine, I I would put it that way. So thank you one more time for being part of that. Thank you.
Really happy to be involved. Thank you so much for the invite.
And have a great evening.